And, and hello, everyone. And I will just say before I say anything else that we are recording this session this evening. So if you don't want to be seen on camera, and you won't be seen unless you ask a question, or you might be shown just down the side, very small. But if you don't want to be seen, please turn your camera off. Okay, so let me begin. Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to our third Audience With event. And tonight we're going to be exploring the astonishing magical world of water with our very knowledgeable speaker, Jeremy Jones, who I will introduce shortly. Before I do, as a reminder to our regular followers and for some background for our new attendees, welcome to those who are brand new to us. I'm Liz Butler, and I'm here with my fellow co-founders from the Awakening Heart Collective, Louise Livingstone, Peter Granger, and Claire Berry. We are professionals with an academic, therapeutic, or general interest in the heart, and it's our desire to educate people on the power of the heart for individual and global healing. We're a relatively new venture, but we've got lots of thoughts and ideas on how to develop our work. And it's our intention not only to create a space for learning, but to come together regularly as a supportive community, to connect and draw inspiration from one another. We want to create a true collective, as the name says, of like-minded, like-hearted people between whom authentic information and wisdom can be shared. And in this age of fast developing AI, when it's going to become increasingly difficult to determine what is real and what is true, we hope this space will provide you with at least one place you can come where you know that what is shared comes direct from the heart and therefore by definition is authentic. So on to tonight. Before I introduce Jeremy, we're going to begin, as we always do, with a very short heart connection. And this evening, my colleague Peter is going to lead us into this. So thank you, Peter.
So make yourself comfortable and settle your feet on the floor. If you wish, you can close your eyes. Gently breathe in through your nose. Gradually lengthen and deepen your breath as you do so. Just do this for a couple of breaths. Now visualize your heart, and if it helps, place your hand over it. As you inhale, imagine the refreshing, energizing air filling your heart. And as you exhale, imagine it leaving again. Just keep breathing for a few more breaths. As you do this, bring to mind somebody you love. It could be a family member or a friend, or perhaps even a pet. As you breathe out, imagine your love, gratitude,
Jason?
and appreciation moving from your heart center out to this person or to your pet. As you breathe in, imagine their love coming back to you and receive it in your heart center. Just keep breathing and do this for a few more moments. Finally, reach out with your open heart to all members of the group tonight and to those who'll be watching on the recording. Do this for a few more breaths before we return to the room. Okay, we'll close it there. So over to you again, Liz.
Liz, you're muted.
Apologies, everyone. Oh dear. What I was saying is, first of all, thank you, Peter, and that it's so important that we just spend a couple of moments just connecting, because even though we're not together in the same actual space. We're together in this virtual space, and the connections that we make between us are real. And it helps to create a lovely atmosphere and energy for us to come together and learn. So once again, thank you, Peter. So you may be wondering what water has to do with the heart. Well, in fact, it's a topic of great relevance, as both water and the heart act as agents of communication in our world, and both carry a message of connection. We'll hopefully get into some of that later, but let's begin now by me introducing you to Jeremy. So Jeremy Jones has a long-held interest in the energetic nature of our world, and seeing the many ways in which the intelligent energies throughout nature have been dismissed and undermined, he is passionate about teaching others how we can foster and enhance natural resonance and coherence in the energies of our living environment. Jeremy began his journey into the world of healing energies a number of decades ago with studies in several Eastern healing paradigms: Tai Chi, Qigong, macrobiotic medicinal cookery, and shiatsu. More recently, he trained at the renowned Dr. Ibrahim Karim's School of Biogeometry. Biogeometry being the science that uses shapes, colors, motion, and sound to induce harmony into the subtle energies of our environment. For the past 23 years, he's also been the senior sales manager for Grander Water, a company whose innovations enable users to create highly coherent, vital water to support health and well-being. So he'll be telling us more about that technology later. But for now, Jeremy, I'm going to hand over to you. I know you've got a lovely presentation to share with us. And just to let you all know, Jeremy will speak for, I think, around about an hour, and then we will have time for questions at the end. If you want to put questions into the chat, you can do that, or at the end, you can speak them to Jeremy, whatever you prefer. Okay, Jeremy, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz and Peter and Louise for inviting me to your community. I really appreciate you trusting me with your community, and really appreciate what you're doing in the area of working with the heart, because it's such an unspoken about part of our being, and there's so many different aspects to it. So without further ado, I will start the presentation. We're going to be looking at many different things. I have a little apology to make, which is that if I've done my job properly tonight, you will be feeling overwhelmed on the one hand, but excited and connected at another level, perhaps that you hadn't even thought was possible. Over the last 35 years, my life has taken me in many different directions. And when I look back now, I can only see it as a privilege. And also a part of my early childhood as a dyslexic child was that I could never deal with linear learning. I was very spatial, very right brain. And so this presentation is going to be quite right brain. It's not going to be too scientific, although obviously science will be there. So allow it to wash over you. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So essentially, the first part of this presentation is what I call a catch-up, which is really updating you into where I am in my boots and how I perceive the universe. And of course, a part of that really is so that you fully understand where I'm coming from. Having a background and a grounding in where I've come from will help you to see the relevance and the connections that I'm making. So like anything that's new to us, we can try it on and we can put it back on the coat hanger if we don't like it. So rather than notice you maybe go to shutdown, or you may think this is a load of rubbish, or I don't agree with that, just like a piece of clothing, try it on, see if it fits. And if you don't like it, put it back on the hanger. And so that's the sort of the initial invitation. We're going to be looking at fundamentally the cosmic soup that life is occurring in. And this is something Ironically, I shouldn't have to be telling you this, because if our educational system wasn't so fractured by design, we would have an understanding of all these interconnections. Instead, everything is taught in separate silos. And what they say often is that, biology transitions to chemistry, chemistry transitions to physics, physics transitions to maths, and then maths transitions to frequency and geometry. And so nature does the whole thing in one package, but we've had to separate them all out. So in the inquiry, we're going to be looking at the invisible worlds and the ways in which the energies of the invisible worlds affect us. That's the first part of the talk. And that's basically the context or the grounding for what is going to follow. And then we're going to delve into water memory. We're going to be looking at structure, and we're going to be looking at coherence. And then lastly, we're going to be looking at water as a transmitter and the innovative work of Johann Grander, who created an extraordinary legacy innovation that repatriates water to its primordial healthy state. So give yourselves a moment to let the information settle, like rain soaking into dry ground. If something sparks a thought, a question, an insight, jot it down, as you may want to share it later. So our insights are a sacred whisper, a legacy for the next generation. But first, here is an odd picture. In 1960, my family, my dad and my mum, decided to take us on holiday, and we got up early in the morning. I love early mornings. And we got in the car, drove through the early morning darkness to arrive at a little airport called Lid, this is in 1960, where Dad put the car on the plane, and we sat in the back of the plane. And this, to a 7-year-old, was like totally magical. It was bonkers. You could never do that now. And we went to Switzerland, and there's my dad and there's me, age 7. And Dad built a water wheel, you can see in the foreground. And I just fell in love with water. He was intrigued with water as well. And that little water wheel, would you believe, it was rigged up to, I don't know how he did it, but a little bit of thread. And he bought a little cable car. It was in some toy shop in Switzerland. And it went up and down this cable car powered by this water wheel. And so this was like seventh heaven to me. And I've never forgotten that. I've always had a deep connection with the mountains, with water, with flow. It's always been magical for me. And so my sweet spot is to be my clothes smelling of firewood smoke, by a river, making food, picnicking, being out in nature. That is the resonance, the deep resonant connection. Whenever I do that, I realize I've had that very early on in my life, and it's something that's stayed with me. So here I am, age 7. This is in Wales, in the River Dorothea. And I used to make dams. I would just play in the water forever and ever and ever. And what's interesting about any picture we have from our childhood is that something meets us from our past. And it's sort of extraordinary to think that 65 years later, 66 years later, I can be looking at this young 7-year-old and look at the journey that I've made in my life and all of the ups and the downs and all the things we go through. So let's just start where I started when I started studying macrobiotics, which was looking at tendencies in nature that are around us. So somewhere in there is us. The planet Earth is somewhere in the Milky Way, and we are there in this extraordinary expanse. And we forget this. We tend to look in our lives in a very linear way and forget that actually we are in an extraordinary situation. And our relationship with the vertical is sort of reduced a lot. It's interesting because in Japanese, the writing goes from top to bottom, and that was apparently to acknowledge heaven and earth. And then linear writing came in and sort of flattened everything. So we've seen these before. So this is a little sort of a whistle-stop tour of tendencies in nature and vortical tendencies in nature. Obviously, it's a water vortex. So let these images arrive because they are profound. And these are energetic images of the way flow happens. And this is not talked about in any academic subjects as an interconnected whole. This is sort of happening right now. The unfurling of fern heads, just extraordinary. A Ramon cabbage, quite extraordinary when you look at that and you contemplate that that's actually surfing on this invisible frequency that is penetrating every living system that surrounds us. This is the inner ear. And so essentially we are present to these frequencies manifesting, as Dr. Karim calls, as nature's design language, or the physics of excellence. So this is the template upon which all life exists. And, matter is danced essentially into existence via a multidimensional frequency. So this is an image of a cymatic plate where they put sand and they vibrate the sand with different frequencies, and it literally produces all those different, the single frequencies. They're pure sine wave frequencies that produce these special images from just pure wave sounds, which when I saw that, I was just blown away. I thought, oh my goodness, that's interesting. But then I got even more blown away when I saw a cross section of the DNA on the top left of the screen. And I immediately thought, well, that looks like a mandala. And of course, on the right there is an Indian drawn mandala. And then below is the stained glass window in a cathedral. And then there's an electron microscope image of a DNA in the bottom left. And so really, I was totally in receipt of this idea that, the DNA is a fractal receiver. And there's lots of talk about that. Dan Winters talks about that. And it is tuned to the archetypal frequencies. So we are a biological broadcast of the divine blueprint. We are the download. And in many religions, they say, we are the house of the divine lives in us. It doesn't live outside us in churches. It lives as a part of our embodiment. And of course, the Chinese had this deeper connection too. There was a real sense of the I Ching, and of course, the 64 hexagrams and 64 codons. It's like, well, hang on a minute, something's going on there, and I haven't fully got to the bottom of it, but there's a huge connection. And so the ancients had a wisdom that was beyond my comprehension. And, this is something people in the group might know or have something to share about. But just to keep it simple, so looking at a simple apple, for instance, and the in-breath and out-breath of the universe, the helical spiral and the toroidal sphere, these are patterns of nature or energies that are forming natural forms, and they're all around us. And we bite into an apple and don't think anything of it, but actually, how is it created? Why has it got these rounded curves? And then, we start to see that these are manifestations of the spiral, the helical spiral and the toroidal sphere. And there again, in the outer ear, which is reflected in the golden mean, and then the inner ear as a spiral as well. And the image on the left, which is a hand-drawn picture of the yin and yang symbol. So you can just make out the yin and yang symbol there. But of course, the yin and yang symbol is a two-dimensional image representing a three-dimensional state of the transition state of one energetic quality going into the other, the masculine and feminine. So these are aspects that are around us all the time. And Torrent Guasp, a Spanish cardiac myocardial, he discovered, looking at autopsies of the heart, that the heart was one muscle. It's one spiral, which is extraordinary. And so it's this idea that it pulses, and it isn't necessarily a mechanical pump, but that it is wrapped around, so that there is, when the electricity pulses through it, it pulses through it as a pulse, as a wave, which starts to get us to think. So with the exercise that Peter did just now of slowing down our heart and tuning into the rhythm and the flow of the nature of our heart, and how it, we have that capacity to feel, to listen. And so if we start to even think that, apparently the new science now in cardiology has now having acknowledged that it is this one muscle, it's changed their understanding of the vortical way in which any operations that are done don't interfere with certain innovations, because before it was seen mechanically and it wasn't seen helically. And so that's actually having a huge impact on now sort of advancements in science around the heart. And again, the golden mean showing up in banding, in the fascia, in the pineal gland, and the way we are, the shape of the head. So all of these patterns are around us. And this was from the Heart Math Institute, talking about the power, the electrical power of the heart over the brain. And we all know that, when we fall in love with someone, we feel heart connection, and you can be the other side of the world and you can feel their presence right with you. And so, it's an extraordinary thing having a heart, because it has so many dimensions to it. And it can feel grief, it can feel love, it can feel panic, it can feel hysteria. The Chinese model of the heart was, you have the heart protector, which is the pericardium, which protects the heart from these emotions and from loud noises when we're walking in the street. And when we sometimes, if our heart protector, our pericardium is weak, someone might sound their horn and suddenly it just goes right into us and it shocks us. So it's like the heart protector as a distinction in Chinese medicine is a thing. And of course, people can die of a broken heart. So the heart has many different aspects in its architecture in cohering and bringing us into a state of equipoise and stillness. I never forget in the macrobiotic narrative, they were looking at the structure of the human body and how the masculine element is receiving heaven's energy. And of course, in the man, our sexual organs are expressed outwards. And of course, with women, it's upwards and inwards. And so there is this sense that, men tend to be more mental, more top heavy, and women tend to be more connected with the earth and sensing through their bodies and into their deeper gut and feeling. And I just thought this is the dance of the polarities. It's a beautiful analogy in how the thing that connects us is our heart, is our heartedness. And I certainly struggle as a man sometimes to be in my heart. And whereas women find it a lot easier. And it's like, for me, my learning and my teaching is to, if I get stressed out of my head, come into my heart space. So I just thought that was an interesting diagram to use. Now, in terms of also the way water moves through the planet and the phases, the Chinese developed this narrative called the 5 phases of qi. And this was interesting because it formed a very strong part of my journey to healing. I had epilepsy, grand mal epilepsy, when I was in my teens, and I discovered macrobiotics and used it as a way to heal my blood and my body. And the 5 elements is a beautiful narrative to dive into because it looks at the different expressions energetically of water, but also how they manifest in the seasons. So right now we're coming into fire, which is fully expanded. The organs associated with that are the heart, the small intestines as a burning space, and the triple heater and the pericardium. And the taste with the heart, organs have a craving. So the heart craves bitter, surprise, surprise. So coffee, chocolate. The positive emotion with the heart is a sense of calm and compassion. When the heart is out of balance, it's hysterical, and you can hear and also when the heart is out of balance, the person produces a scorched smell. So acupuncturists will smell scorched with that person. And again, I won't go through all the elements, but each element has its place, and the water, the way the water moves and expresses it. So the autumn, you go into sweet. The fruits of the summer, culminate, and the organ associated with the autumn is the stomach and spleen, and the emotion is groundedness, connectedness. But when it's out of balance, it's needy, it's sticky, and it can feel sad. And the taste of that is obviously sweet in the autumn. I will do this. It's interesting, and we got the lungs, which is between autumn and midwinter. Lungs, large intestines, and I love this because the taste is pungent, and if you think about our organ system, the skin and the lungs and the intestines are all connected as a membrane. And so in the wintertime, when the first frost happens, energetically, when the water freezes on the trees, the leaves get pushed away. And so often if our lungs are out of balance, then we'll start coughing, or you hear people coughing. And it's like, because their lungs aren't free, they're congested. And so, emotionally, the house of the lungs is grief. And so working with inspiration. So the Chinese had this extraordinary dance through the seasons and into the wintertime, which is kidney bladder, taste was salty. And the emotion was courageousness. Hence, in the First World War, they used to talk about, soldiers having strong kidney. So it's like, and the weak element for the kidneys is fear. And so the Chinese had this beautiful system, and of course, moving into spring completes the story where the water arises into the branches and the leaves open out, which is the liver and gallbladder, ascending energy, and the taste is sour associated with the liver, and the emotion is humor, and then the opposite is anger. So the liver is very much to do with that. So the Chinese model is a very beautiful model, and it's really worth diving into. And the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine, I think it's like 4,000 years ago, the Chinese were dialed into this and they were able to write about it. And these are some books that I pulled up just from my studies in macrobiotics, and there are many interesting ones out there. Unfortunately, a lot of them are out of print. But the whole journey of macrobiotics was about dialing into the energetic quality of food. And I had one of the distinctions that I really love is that we have the distinction that in nutrition, food has a calorific value, and that's the quantitative way in which we value food. But in Chinese or the energetics of five elements, if you imagine you could burn a carrot and a banana, and it would have the same calorific value. And yet energetically, a banana is growing in the tropics and a carrot is growing down into the ground, maybe more than in the northern hemisphere. So the point I'm making here is that in right even to this day in nutritional science, we're not discussing the quality of the food. So for instance, a banana is a cooling tropical food, whereas a carrot is more warming and grounding and gathering. So in the macrobiotic narrative, there was this whole idea of looking at the quality of the food that we bring to us seasonally that's in balance and in harmony with our blood. And this is part of my healing journey. So Claude Bernard is an interesting character because he distinguished this thing called bioterrain theory. And bioterrain theory is a beautiful way of understanding the homeostasis of the blood, saliva, and the urine. And it's still dismissed as sham science. But of course, when we think about the field of our well-being, that what's holding all of our organs together, what's holding the entire story of our bodies is the water or the blood and the water, which is a part of that. That is what's going on. So it would make sense that if we can learn how to, for instance, we learn how to make a miso soup, which I highly recommend. I can show you, I've made a video of one, so I can send it to you. But miso was an extraordinary journey because it reflects the evolutionary journey of where we've come from. It has seaweed. It has this fermented salty taste to it, not too salty, but to get it right. And then you put ginger and different things in it. And in Nagasaki, this doctor down below, Tatsuchiro Azuki, he fed all of his patients with miso, and they all survived heavy radiation poisoning. And at the time, the Vatican declared it a miracle, because then no one understood why. And so, if you're living in London or the air quality is suboptimal where you are, miso chelates heavy metals. And unfortunately, we're all living under skies now which are fairly polluted with known heavy metals. So I think we all need to learn how to make miso soup to balance our biome, if that makes any sense. Is this interesting so far? Great. So then we're looking at the planet from a energetic perspective, and the way in which the magnetic fields on the planet actually affect our body and affect living systems. So we forget that we're living on essentially it's like an electric motor spinning at 1,000 miles at the equator. And we're all familiar with the aurora borealis because the solar radiation hits it at the poles and you have this amazing light show. But we forget there are also much more subtle magnetic fields generated by the core of the Earth's metallurgy of nickel and iron, and that they throw out different energetic magnetic fields. And so this is something that I then dialed into as an electrosensitive. I was starting to learn about geopathic stress and dialing deeply into geopathics. And of course, some of the very obvious things are like there are these grid lines, which I'll talk more about in a second. But this is how we all have magnetite in our brains, and of course, birds have magnetite as well. So they have an onboard navigation system. And some people say, well, birds use the stars. Well, no, they don't. They use the grid lines. Animals use grid lines, and they literally they're accurately following a line. And so they can, once they have that, if they're born on a certain line, how house martins can come exactly back to their nests. Well, how do they do that? It's like, well, they do it because these lines exist, and they're sort of born, when they're born in those lines, they obviously have a frequency that they recognize as home. So Manfred Curry distinguished the Curry lines, which run diagonally across the Earth from the northwest to the southeast, and from the northeast to the southwest. And as a biogeometrist, we're taught how to measure them and find out where they are. They're horizontal and they're vertical. And then Dr. Hartmann discovered that they are also as a grid system running north, south, and east, west. And so this is when you're a biogeometrist and you start to go into a house, you can actually you build this invisible picture of these lines. And unfortunately, these lines have an impact in nature. When trees grow at an angle, they're either avoiding underground water radiation, or if trees are on growing what's called on a geopathic knot, then they'll start to get arborilogical cancer. So, or there will be wasp nests or lots of ivy. So there are radiation-loving plants and radiation-hating plants. So there are certain trees. So these are all anomalies. We have ants, for instance, coming up in a certain part of the house. And of course, you can harmonize these things and those things go away. So it's a fascinating study. But this, unfortunately, was an example of two people whose houses I was working with in my previous incarnation with a company called Geopathic, where we do blind assessment. So we'd actually find out where the grid lines were and then put crosses there and then ask the client if they had any challenges. And sure enough, and it was quite scary just doing it because, you know, people were having serious conditions. The one on the left was a gentleman in the Isle of Wight, and he passed away. And he'd been sleeping on that bed for probably 30, 40 years. So in other words, he's constantly exposed to that radiation. The gentleman on the right, it's a lovely gentleman. He unfortunately, he bought the house from someone who was ill. And I don't know whether he got the same condition, but he ended up getting a leukemia, which he's been working with to heal and doing amazing things. And so that was another one. And I was sent there because his naturopath had picked up that he had bad, heavy radiation to deal with, earth radiation. And when I went there, sure enough, it doesn't lie. It was just there. That's a Hartman, like, do you see the angles? You've got a Hartman and a Curry in one place, which is quite rare, you see. So so that's the geopathics. And then we get into the living environment that we're in right now, which is, of course, we're surrounded by high frequency and low frequency alternating fields. The human body is direct current. It operates at sub amperes and 60 to 90 millivolts. We're surrounded by the alternating current, which means that it's like a fast tennis match of energy moving back and forwards at 50 cycles per second, 230 volts. So we have a lot of leaky electricity going around our houses, which affects the water body, which affects our energetics. So I personally we turn off the electricity in our house at nighttime, and the fridge just hangs, it does its thing, nothing defrosts. And so the thing is that allows you to camp in your own home. It allows you to drop into a deep place of stillness. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. So we're surrounded and habituated to these technologies. I mean, this is an extraordinary example of a pylon next to a house. I've got instruments that pick up frequencies that show magnetic frequencies that show that the people in those houses will get leukemia. There's no way they can live in that house and not get leukemia, because that's how dangerous how punitive these radiation frequencies are. Solar edge inverters produce dirty electricity, dimmer switches, chargers by the bed, microwave cookers obviously unbond the molecules in the food. And induction hobs, whilst they're all convenient, they produce a huge magnetic spike. So if you're a mum and you're gestating a child, that spike is going to be going through your uterus. So we have all these technologies that are convenient, but the unfortunate reality is that they're not convenient in the long term. So always use combusted heat gas, and of course fuse boards as well. Another area where you have a low frequency magnetics. So, for instance, there was a lovely guy called Alf Riggs who came to a flat I was going to get in Hampstead many years ago. And he said, if you sleep there, you will get ill. And because basically the flat was on the ground floor and it had all the consumer units for all the other flats on the ground floor. And so the spikes coming into the room were really, really horrific. In fact, we could actually feel it on our heads, which is why I wanted him to. It was a lovely flat, and it was like I really wanted to live there. But he came in and just said, if you sleep there, you'll get that illness. If you sleep there, you'll get that illness. And I thought, oh my God, this is something that's fascinating. Again, we can't ignore these things. And now, of course, we're inundated in a soup with the high frequency mobile line of sight masts. We live in Wi-Fi. We're habituated to using DECT cordless phones. We have smartwatches and we have smart meters. Now, I'm not a Luddite. I have the internet. We're on the internet now, but it's all wired through hard wiring. I'm electrosensitive, so that's partly one of the reasons why I got involved in all of this, to figure out how I could create a home where I didn't have to have the experience of feeling blasted by all these things. Wi-Fi is a toxin. It's a pulse microwave radiation. It's on the same spectrum as a microwave, and a lot of people who live with these things will start to feel deep background tiredness. They won't drop into deep sleep, and they'll start to get all sorts of other complications. So my invitation for you to hear is to consider that these things are toxic for the body, and they affect our waters at a deep level. Dr. Karim, the founder of biogeometry, has a book that he wrote called Back to a New Future for Mankind, where he talks about the proliferation of these frequencies is actually causing a global warming of an effect, but also more profoundly, these frequencies are actually causing a drying effect in the universe and in our homes. And so it's making us chronically dehydrated against the background of already having lost a lot of our thirst reflex. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. And so this is his book. If you're interested to learn more about him, he talks about the body as an open energy system, in the same way the house is an open energy system, the doors and the windows, chi is flowing back and forwards, and as it is in our bodies. So that part of the biogeometry narrative is to really start to unpack and understand how we can bring in coherence by harmonizing the doors, the windows, the structures, and then also the geopathic lines as well. Down the middle there's two examples of pendulums. One is dedicated to discovering where the Curry lines are, and the other one is dedicated to discovering where the Hartmann line is. Biogeometry is an extraordinary science. I highly recommend anyone interested does the foundation course. I jokingly say it's like the Harry Potter Hogwarts that we should all have gone to, because it really is something that it's one of those things where you do it and you get the aha factor over and over and over again, because it's like it's something you knew, like education. It's allowing the truth to come out. And so for me, biogeometry was when I read that book, there was a case study in it which talked about the harmonization of a village in Switzerland, and where he literally harmonized because they'd Swisscom had put a mobile phone mast in a church spire, and everyone was getting ill. And he was asked to come and harmonize it. And Swisscom thought, well, actually, he'll just do a placebo with them. But he muscle tested all the homeowners, tweaked all the devices that he put there. And sure enough, stopped cows having miscarriages. The bird migratory patterns rebooted to go back into the barns. And everyone was happy again. So this was an extraordinary case study. And it's discovering that made me want to study this, because it's an extraordinary science. So this is the reality, is that, is our home an oasis of energetic health? Water quality lies at the core of all living systems. It's the silent architect of our cellular coherence and regeneration. It's the quality and energetic purity that sits at the heart of our health. And so what's our relationship with water? What do we have one even, or do we just turn the tap on and use it as a commodity? The reality is that if we were in a bath and the bath represented the entire water in the world, the usable water that we have access to is like a teaspoon. So it's quite stunning when you think about that, and then you think about our relationship with water and the fact that we throw it away. We're so profligate with it. We don't really have a relationship with it. And this was a talk I attended with Torsten Ghost, who had this wonderful story about water and his relationship with the earth as first ancestors. He says that Mother Earth is all of our mothers. We are trying to wake up with the same language that put us to sleep. Everything is alive, everything has memory, everything has consciousness. This ancient thinking is now reflected in quantum physics. And the story that he had was extraordinary, where he actually was sent to a Catholic school in a reservation, and he wanted to go to the loo, and he was sent to pee in the bathroom, and he couldn't defecate in the water. It was like it wasn't in his DNA, so to speak, for him to actually poison the water. So that shows you how connected he was with the spirit of water. So here we are spending north of £6 billion in this country alone on bottled water. It's causing huge amount of pollution, and even my wife has just told me microplastics are being found now in human breast milk. So how do we untether ourselves from bottled water and fall in love with water as nature intended? So just quickly, the core pillars of water, the way Orthodox science sees water, is that it's essentially its chemistry, its reactivity, its pH, and then the microbiology. Are the bugs in it? Yes, there are sometimes they're not, but just to be on the safe side, they put chlorine in the water, which is a problem in itself. It affects it oxidizes cholesterol, but that's a whole other story. And then you have the physics, the turbidity, total dissolved solid. So how hard is the water? And those three pillars are the basis upon which the water authorities measure and determine the health of that water. But there's a new science emerging. Those are the classic parameters. The new science is that there are two new additional subcategories. Water has an internal structure, and it also has the ability to hold information or carry memory. And so this is now key to understanding how we can recohere water to give it its divine properties back again. Because of course, when water comes in a pipe and a tap, it's been pumped miles and miles and miles, its structure is compromised. And hence we are tethered to mineral water because it comes from source. So clearly the emanations of natural water that is bottled is something that we generally are attracted to. But we know that tap water is flat, it's dead, and it's got chlorine in it. So we are in receipt of that reality. And then, well, how do we deal with it? So water memory, structure, and coherence. So just to tip our hat to some of the people that went before who were working with water in different ways. Alexis Carrel, I thought, was quite an interesting example because he won a Nobel Prize in physiology for keeping a chicken cellar heart indefinitely by giving the cells the nutrients they needed and cleaning out the cells with the things they didn't need. And if that isn't a message to all of us in terms of how we conduct how we look after this rented house called a human body in our lives, and how we feed it the right nutrition, how we give it the right water, I don't know what is. So he was doing that back in 1912. And I thought that was a very moving thing to come across. Albert St. Georgi had this wonderful quote saying that water is life's matter and matrix, mother and medium. There's no life without water. He got the Nobel Prize in physiology for his discovery or creating isolating vitamin C. Claude Vincent was very interesting. He was a French hydrologist who was given a commission by the French government to go and determine the healthiest water throughout the French different regions, and he was able to determine the longevity of different people by looking at the values of pH, the redox or the electronegativity, and the turbidity of the water. And he came up with a very interesting finding around what that balance is. And we can talk about that later on. But essentially, he was, we're talking about slightly alkaline, very slightly alkaline water, just slightly off the acidic end, with a light negativity, not a huge amount of negativity, but electronegativity in water is so important, and there's so much to talk about that. So, I mean, Dr. Tennant's work and how the cell heals with 50 millivolts of electronegativity, and how we can't heal unless we have that. So that's where the power of raw food comes in, which is cascaded with electronegativity. So all of these things are there. And of course, moving to the last gentleman, the founder of homeopathy, Christian Frederick Samuel Hahnemann, who discovered that, by using resonance and succussion, he could create potencies that were benign using all sorts of plants or poisons that had an impact. And by using the memory held in the water through using distillates, he was able to create homeopathic remedies. More recently, Victor Schauberger, an extraordinary character. If you saw the video prior to this that I was talking to Liz about, we were looking at water, and Victor Schauberger was an extraordinary forester who looked at water and looked at the vortical quality of water and the implosive qualities of water, which, when you think about it, right now the trees are in full leaf, and we are in the summertime, the glorious summertime, and we don't think how those leaves gets hydrated. If we're out, it's been very dry recently, and when I go out and I'm walking the dog, the earth's cracking, and I'm thinking, God, if I stay out there for 20 minutes, I start to get parched, and it gets super hot. Whereas the leaves think nothing of it. They can be up there all day for a whole season, and they don't get dry, and they photosynthesize, and they draw the water through the root system up into the canopy. And Schauberger alluded to the idea of implosive forces happening in nature. And these are forces that Johann Grander also talked about, and how the vortical nature of water has its own unique anomalies. And so he was a very interesting gentleman. Highly recommend getting the book to look at. It's a stunning book, amazing diagrams. One lovely experiment he did. He was trying to figure out why is it that fish, and this is an interesting one for anyone who's listening, because you can look down a river. I'm quite near the River Test in Hampshire, and you can look over a bridge and see these lovely trout sitting in the water, not moving at all. And yet, they're experiencing a vast quantity of water moving by, but they're just chilling. And so what Victor Schauberger did was he couldn't figure out, he knew it was something to do with the architecture of the fish and the flow form of the water. But what he hadn't realized, because he tested the theory to discover it, was that if you raise the temperature above 4 degrees, which is the optimal temperature or density of the water in a river, the fish loses its footing. So in other words, the architecture of the fish has been designed around the temperature of the water. So you're not just seeing the design of the fish, you're also dealing with the invisible thing, which is the thermality and the density of water and its temperature. Very, very interesting description and discussion. But that's one of the things in his book, many other things as well. And then even more recently, we've probably all heard of Masaru Emoto's work and his amazing crystallography, and how the water has the ability to receive information, whether it's saying hateful things to water, and then or loving things to water, and then taking photographic pictures of the crystallization formations, and where water has had loving thoughts sent to it, or it's been on a beautiful picture of a sacred cathedral, or a beautiful coherent image, the water crystals are coherent. And equally, when it's played rock music or it's exposed to "I hate you" written down, when the water crystals are frozen, it produces a dissonance. And so this is an extraordinary thought, and we have to take stock of that, because of course our minds are giving us information all the time. And what information are we giving to our own waters? Are we giving to our own hearts? And of course, we can go into a slump and we can feel bad, we can have low self-esteem, and we get into this sort of cycle of habituation. And yet we are in charge of our thoughts, we're in charge of our minds, and protecting our hearts and our emotional state and acknowledging this connection that Emoto is making is really important, because I think it really does give us a strong heads up. And of course, Veda Austin, who I listened to last October in Scotland, she's an extraordinary lady, has the most incredible life story about how water and her healing journey has gone, and her discovery, taking the crystallography to a whole new level. So again, this is real world stuff, and it might seem very, very woo-woo to someone who has a very strong left brain reductionist scientific background, but this is information, and the Akashic records now that Veda's talking about, an extraordinary dialogue she's having with autistic people, with psychics, and their relationship with water, and the downloads she's getting, quite incredible. Highly recommend you dial into her. Dr. Shu-Yin Lo, I met, an extraordinary man. He discovered something called double helix water with an atomic force microscope. And this is an astounding discovery, because he essentially didn't even know what he was looking for. He had to program the atomic force microscope, because it's not an optic microscope. It's kind of deeply mathematical, and it's sort of high physics. But he told the microscope what he was looking for, and then basically these images started appearing. And essentially this is happening at an atomic level, atomic force microscopy. So this is really telling us what we already have now seen in the slides earlier, how that water is carrying this energetic code of coherence that is informing all life. And in fact, they did some thermographic imaging with cameras, and after someone had taken double helix water, what they discovered was that they could see imaging of the effect of them drinking the water, and how it started to trace the meridians, and it started to show up thermographically where the meridians were blocked by drinking this water. So the idea perhaps is that when we're forming embryologically, this potency of the double helix narrative in our amniotic fluid, in the formation of our lives, is pivotal to how everything starts to unfold. But there's just so many mysteries still to understand. Gerald Pollack, a beautiful man. I've met him. He's also met Johann Grander, interestingly enough. And he distinguished something very important, which was exclusion zone water. And going back to the trees and the way nature functions, he distinguished that that the water in our bodies and the water in the trunks of the tree are actually what's known as exclusion zone water. It's a different quality of water. It hasn't any solids. It's discrete and it's clean. And all biological systems need that in order to maintain their coherence. So when it comes to us drinking tap water or bulk water, our body has to work very hard and often won't even absorb that water. So we'll just pee straight through it. So the irony is you could be drinking bulk water that doesn't have any biological coherence and not hydrating. So this is where his narrative starts to dial into the idea that we have to have water that has coherence in order for our body to understand it and to use it. And he did many other experiments as well regarding that. And Luc Montagnier, again, a beautiful man. Unfortunately, he's passed away. He did an extraordinary experiment with the energetics of memory. And I highly recommend you look at that film. I'm just looking at my watch now, and I need to move on faster. But anyway, he's a scientist. He basically enabled water. He picked up the information in water energetically, transmitted the frequency of that water to another water via a university. They then put DNA proteins in that water, and it was able to reproduce the AIDS virus. In fact, that he transmitted electronically. He picked up that frequency, and they reproduced it in a university in Italy. And so this was a groundbreaking piece of science that is again worth watching and understanding. So water is a communicator. This is now bringing us towards the end of our talk to just land with this idea and a new set of distinctions. And when I came across this, I was completely astounded. Essentially, Johann Grander, he passed away now. He Austrian. He was a lorry driver most of his life, and he started experimenting with magnets. But he returned. He looked at water as a cosmic matter, and of course, it is a cosmic matter. He looked at water in relation to its relationship with the cosmos and the infinite universe, and all the frequencies that affect water that we forget about. And so his bandwidth for understanding water and water's frequency and coherence was absolutely fascinating. He was very, very dialed in, a very spiritual man, a very quiet man. And he essentially distinguished this notion that water, it has a natural immune system, and that it has the capacity to record the energetic information of what it encounters. And we've discussed that already. So we know that source water, healing waters that have come out of the aquifer of the ground have got this extraordinary provenance, whereas tap water that's been pumped miles and miles and miles is essentially dead and empty and lifeless. And, just briefly, if you can imagine getting on a tube train during the rush hour and traveling, you feel pretty frazzled by the time you get out the other end. And that's your waters. It's like you're picking up on that whole energetic, discombobulating nature of what it's like to go into a tube in a rush hour. Whereas if I said to you, well, do you want a chauffeur-driven car? You'd be a bit less stressed, but you'd be in traffic. But what I'm trying to say is that energetically, we experience the emanations of energy on our being. And so Johann Grander, basically, he developed this hydromagnetic photonic generator using implosive forces. So I don't know whether he knew Schauberger, but he developed this generator, and it produces special water called information or working water. And the baseline for this was that he put in this machine a very, very pure, registered mountain water that it's taken 60 years to percolate through the mountains. And that water can be drank neat. And in fact, we'll talk more about it in a minute. But so that water has a high level of purity. It hasn't seen any line of sight mobile phone masts. It's completely clean, completely clear. And then what he discovered with his device is by putting this high quality water into his device, the result was that the information or the working water was able to communicate and transmit its own coherence to other waters without coming into contact with it, which is kind of like totally bonkers. And when I first came across this, I was super skeptical. The first thing I bought was an energy pen, this thing here. And to be fair with you, I used it, I stirred it around in water because I was being so speedy. It didn't really work, and I threw it into a drawer. Anyway, the company called me back and they said, listen, we see you bought one of our devices. Do you want to come to a talk? I said, absolutely. So I went to this talk, and they did the lemon test, and I slowed my nervous system down enough to taste the difference of what this technology could do. And one thing led to another. I bought a system for my house, and I was working for a reverse osmosis company at the time. And I ended up saying to my wife, you know what, I want to work for this company because they've got something really, really special. And that was 24 years ago now. So I haven't been able to put this down. I'm like a little child in a sweet shop. So grand technology is a passion. The idea of hacking into dead, flat tap water and making it, falling in love with it again so that it becomes thirst quenching. And the idea now of not having to drink bottled water and not have plastic waste, for me, is a life worth living in terms of championing and praising this innovation. So one of the things he did was he exposed by the frequency exposure of this information water, he passed water through the device. So it was a phase change. The water hadn't been in direct contact with it, but by going through his device, what he was able to see with pathogenic bacteria was that the water started to self-heal. So in other words, the water started to self-regenerate after it had been through and past the information water. So this was a very unusual phenomena, and that's why he called it water revitalization. So it's not a glib term. It's actually a term that actually it does what it says on the tin. And never was this more true than a case study in Australia where there was an effluent lagoon. There was effluent water because there was a drought, and the only water available in this golf course was effluent water from the local water authority. And because they had to hydrate the fairways, they allowed this effluent water in. There was flies everywhere. They didn't know what to do. And then they then heard about Granda and the distributor in Australia called Wayne Slack. He got a huge, great industrial Granda unit and started pumping the water in this effluent lagoon where the colony count was super, super high. The water was in an anaerobic, non-oxygen loving state. And then within 6 weeks, the whole thing converted. It all went aerobic. There was no anaerobic bacteria. And there's a TV article where the guy's actually just drinking the water out of the lagoon. And he just said he couldn't believe how this technology could transform the state of water in that way. And so, these are examples, real live examples of the innovative power of this technology. So that's a cross section of the Granda unit. The water flows through the Granda unit. I don't know whether you can still see me on the little picture on the side, but that's a cross section of a unit here. So the water flows through the blue section and out the other side. And it's all based on the size of the property, how many bathrooms you have, and the flow rate and liters per second exposure on the information field. And so when the water comes out, you have revitalized water. And the result, his innovation brought him some merits from the Russian Academy of Natural Sciences, the Silver Medal of Honor, and also recognition from his life's work in Austria, Republic of Austria. So extraordinary man. He didn't travel far, but he was highly revered, and his technology is now used throughout the world in hotels, hospitals, and food production and brewing, where there's no need to have chemicals. We'll talk more about it in a minute. So from the point of view of the, how we have time, just coming at 7 o'clock, nearly there. So we've got in a domestic situation, you plug it into the home, and we filter out, as you can see from the picture on the left, we filter out the chlorine, nitrates, nitrites, and heavy metals. That's the quantitative side of things. And then we take that water and put it through the Granda unit where the magic starts to happen. So it's quantitative removal and then a qualitative state change of the water structure and the coherence of that water. And that water becomes thirst quenching. It becomes enjoyable to drink. People want to bathe in the water. You feel it energetically on the skin. It has energy. It's softer. You don't need to have a water softener. It protects heat exchangers and white goods. You use less detergents, less soap. And also the recent cell biology has now shown that the biological coherence of the water increases with, in some cell biology work, they've discovered that the epithelium in the gut lining increases its health by 17.4%. I don't know any other water in the world that you can drink that will increase your health at that level. I did a 10-day water fast and had an extraordinary result. I had a macular degeneration in my right eye. And I quite by chance had a new pair of spectacles, and I went to Vision Express, and they did a topographical scan of the eye. And I did my 10-day water fast, and my wife said, "Oh, by the way, how's your eye?" And I looked through my right eye, and I could see her face completely clearly, whereas before the degeneration had stopped me having visual acuity over the section of where people's faces and mouths are. So suddenly I could see her smile. And I went back to Vision Express and I said, "Can you do another scan?" And I did. And that, sure enough, the maths is there. You can see topographically. I've got a case study I can show you. So we know that fasting is a hugely healing paradigm. We know that it causes autophagy and it causes ketosis, and that essentially allows the stem cell development. And of course, I was told by the eye specialist that you can never heal the macula. And yet you can. And of course, now I discovered with Granda and the cell biology work, I can say, well, maybe that was accelerated because of Granda. But again, more tests need to be done, but that's the evidence there. We also have it for central heating systems as well, where it can turn the heating water completely clear, removing its smell and bringing it to a near drinking water quality. They have large systems for communal heating around the world. In Austria, have it in Switzerland for hospitals and huge, great apartment buildings. And that water runs completely clear, no chemicals, no biocides. And the other thing I've discovered with biogeometry is that with the and someone has Grander installed in their underfloor heating system, it actually produces a coherence which actually mitigates against geopathic stress. So this was a very unusual discovery for me, and something that the Austrian headquarters knew nothing about. But essentially, if also with underfloor heating, if you get biofilm, which often is a problem in low temperature gradient heating environments, bacteria really thrives. And with groundwater, you literally, there's no bacteria. And I can literally pour the water out of my radiators in my house, just like the picture on the right there, and it comes out completely clear. So it is an extraordinary technology, and it's really an opportunity to dive in and experience the water, which we did in the previous video. But this water is the mountain water I was talking about, and essentially it's passed through this proprietary system, but it's charged up to a level that it's okay to drink. So it's not too powerful, and these bottles produce a coherent field of about 90 centimeters, and so you can literally place a glass of tap water next to the bottle and have another one at least 3 or 4 meters away, and then wait half an hour, and thus you start to realize water can communicate. And what you're getting here in the communication is the energetic imprint or the impregnations of mountain water and all that it can do to recohere dead flat tap water. So it's about a lived experience. So there it is. That's pretty much it. So that's just like a sort of schematic really of what you can do. You can put the bottle next to, we use Biocera because bioceramics are very powerful to get rid of heavy metals. And you can do it with lemon as well. And so that is the end of the presentation. I think am I on time, Liz? It's exactly 8 o'clock. There you go.
Well done, Jeremy. That was absolutely brilliant. I said at the beginning you're very knowledgeable, and I can't believe how much information you managed to squeeze into that 50 minutes. So yeah, fantastic. And I'm sure there's going to be plenty of questions after that, because you did cover a huge range of topics, not just water, but talked about the energetics of our environment and also our food. So has anyone got any questions? As I said earlier, you can put them in the chat if you'd like, or you can put your hand up and we'll unmute you and let you speak directly to Jeremy.
Can't see the big screen.
Put different glasses on so I can see a bit better.
Right.
Okay, just to say, I have put some links in the chat. Jeremy mentioned a few people that I think, if you haven't heard of them, you would probably really enjoy checking out their work. Veda Austin, I put her website in there. Masaru Emoto, his work on the emotions and the effects on water crystals, and Gerard Pollack. So all of those websites are in there. Sue has asked a question, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Could you say a little bit about distilled water? What do you feel about the quality of distilled water?
Well, distilled water is very similar to RO water. It has no
RO being reverse
osmosis. Yeah, so Schauberger distinguished distilled water and RO water as what he called juvenile water. So that water hasn't got any provenance. It's sort of newly birthed, but it hasn't got it's like it hasn't even found its legs yet. It's just literally, it's sort of kind of, it doesn't know anything. And so the idea with water that has been through a ground aquifer and rocks is that it picks up all these subtle emanations that we're only just starting to understand. The Earth's magnetic radiation, for instance, the healthy radiations and the minerals and all these things. So, and those minerals also are working with the cosmos as well, and the frequencies that are going way beyond what we physically see here. So I mean, I started my life with a distiller, right? In London, I thought, well, okay, I want to have pure water. I was boiling this thing day in and day out, and the crud that would come out of it was quite disgusting. The thing with distilled water is that you get cross migration of volatile gases. So when you get the distillate, you still have gases that gas off that actually go into the distilled water. So you've got to put it through a filter again, because distilled water on its own tastes disgusting. It tastes really gross, like reverse osmosis water. But again, don't take it from me, to have the experience. I mean, if I was sat with you now, I would say, pass me a glass of your distilled water, we'll revitalize it, and maybe put a little bit of Celtic sea salt in, because I'd never drink distilled water or reverse osmosis, because it robs you of minerals. It's very mineral hungry. And so it goes into the body and it has to find balance, because distilled water doesn't exist anywhere in nature. You know, when the rain comes down, I mean, right now it's filled with all the junk they're putting in the atmosphere, but you know, it goes through the earth and it comes up through the earth through a natural source. So the thing about distilled water is it's great for batteries. It probably has a use for making colloidal silver, but I personally wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. Sorry to be so pessimistic about it. I hope that helps you answer your question.
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you. So Joanna's asking, the bottle of water, I guess she means the grand bottle, has a best before date on it. Does it run out of its quality?
No, it doesn't. That's a great question, Joanna. No, so they have to put a sell-by date on it because they're part of trading standards. What's interesting is when they bottle this, it's actually cleaned with the water that they put in it, and they send off lab reports to 3 different labs to confirm exactly the quality of the water that goes into this. And so these bottles last indefinitely. And with a wonderful story, I've got a video on my YouTube site where the guy called Oliver Percival, who actually has a grander system in his house, and he had been drinking this bottle in his kitchen, but just when you drink it, you have like a lid full and a liter of water. Anyway, his bottle had basically got down to here, but he built a John Wilkes flow form in his garden, going into a little sort of cubic meter of water as a pond. And but it was getting very cloudy. He thought that the Wilkes flow form would actually stop the water from getting cloudy, but it didn't. And so he had the idea of, well, what would happen if you put this bottle of original Grand Blue water in there? And because it was half empty or 2/3 empty, he filled it with I think pear tree spring water, because he's down in Forest Row. So he diluted the water essentially, but put extra water in it so the bottle would sink to the bottom. He tied a bit of string to the bottle and dropped it into his little pond that was you couldn't see to the bottom of. And within a day, the pond had completely cleared itself. And he did a little video on YouTube for me. So, and that bottle was like 8 years old. That's to answer your question. And diluted and still potent. So we're dealing with some quite unusual energies here. Hope that answers your question, Joanna.
Thank you. Jane has said, that's a comment. She's got the grander system in her house and can testify to its quality and taste. Fantastic.
Thank you, Jane.
About animals and plants. So Pam is asking about the cost. Now, it is quite expensive, isn't it, to put it through your whole house? I don't know if you want to, I mean, expense in terms of value is well worth it.
Yeah, well, you've got it too, Liz, don't forget.
I've got it too.
Anyway.
We've been renting for a while, so I'm missing it. So I've now bought the bottle and using it like that. But yeah.
So to answer your question, the sort of the gnarly subject of money and value and cost, I think the thing is that I always encourage people to buy a bottle of the blue water or one of our accessories and live with it for a bit, and then start to build a relationship with it, so that value becomes a visceral thing. It becomes something that you know and love and trust, because only then can you decide what would the value of that be, to have that water coming out of every single tap filtered and revitalized. And that's a judgment call you have to make. So you can either buy an accessory product. We have these energy boards here. I mean, these cost around £225 plus delivery. And inside that, there's a little metal copper coil with the information water that sits inside here. So you can place a jug on top of it and start your journey with that. And then if you want to go further, you can then have a single tap system, and they're around about 1,150. And that will go into below the sub sink, and you can have one single tap. And then for the whole house, depending on how many bathrooms you have, the standard house system, which is this is the cross section of the standard house system here. This comes with 4 large 10-inch filters, and that system starts at around about 3,950 for the 3 filters. And then if you have the 4, it's around about 4,150, and that's including delivery and VAT. But the installation is by others, so we would instruct your plumber on how to install it. The biggest headache is finding a space, because it's got to go in where the mains riser comes into the house, and often it's in the kitchen, and so sometimes you have to build a kiosk outside the kitchen so they can accommodate it, and then it has to be a frost-free kiosk. But where there's a will, there's a way. So if you genuinely fall in love with this technology, as I have, then you can always find a way to install it. And I believe that, if you value water and you value having coherent water in your life for yourself and your family and your loved ones, then the money will come. You will find a way of financing it. But it's, for me, it's not about, I have clients sometimes, or potential prospects, that come along and they say, I want to have it now. I say, hang on a second, have you had an experience of it? No. I actually discourage them. I say, listen, forgive me, but I'd rather you experience it so you know what it is you're buying into, than then having it put in their homes and then not really appreciating it. Because I want people to cherish and appreciate this technology. Because for me, the sales part of it is rather vulgar. I'd rather be in relationship with the person and have that growing dynamic where they start to really call it towards them and really value it. So I hope that's answered your question.
I mean, what persuaded us to get it was the lemon test. And do you want to just talk through that? Because we put the protocol for that on under the YouTube video for the interview.
Yeah, so you can, if you buy a bottle of original blue water, which is, it's not blue, by the way, the bottle's slightly blue. I think we did a whole deal, didn't we? Just under £20, including delivery. You basically need never open it, you never drink it. And what you would do is you'd pour 2 glasses of tap water and put 1 glass next to the bottle and wait for half an hour and then taste it. But then when you take the glass that's been next to the bottle, literally smell it, move it around and take a little sip, and then see how that sip lands in the mouth, see how thirst quenching it is, how round it is, and how you actually genuinely want to swallow it and absorb it. And then go to the tap water that you've got in another glass that you poured at the same time. But nevertheless, it's at least 3 meters away, so there's no interruption with the field. And you can taste that, and then you'll notice a difference. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the point is you've got to have a lived visceral experience of it. Now you can do that test with lemon. So you can squeeze a lemon, make sure the lemon doesn't go anywhere near the bottle, otherwise you'll avoid the experiment. Squeeze the lemon into 2 glasses and put 1 half of the lemon squeezed into a glass next to the bottle. Don't dilute the lemon. And again, like with the water, leave it there half an hour. And then you've got the other lemon that hasn't been near the bottle, at least 3-4 meters away. And then you taste the lemon. Liz, over to you. What was your experience?
Yeah, it was very different. I think you did it with vodka as well.
I know, I'm a bit naughty. If I think there's a little bit of a humor going on, and I think, well, and I always ask, I'm not trying to encourage alcoholism. My dear dad died of it, but again, vodka, you can put a little bit of vodka next to the bottle, and again, do it without a sample that hasn't been next to it, and you can wait half an hour, and it's quite unbelievable. I mean, not that I want to fall in love with vodka, but the vodka that's been next to the bottle is soft, velvety. It doesn't have any what I call background fire, and it goes down very easily. So what can I say? It just tastes incredible.
No, definitely there was a big difference when we did that.
Yeah.
Can I don't know where to put my hand up, but I just wanted to share. Jeremy, do you remember when you came over to my house to do the biogeometry? Do you remember that I showed you the water that I collected from my distiller?
Yes, I can't remember. No, I can't.
I'm just sharing that for the lady who was asking about distilled water.
Okay.
So if you remember, I shared with you that I have a water ionizer, which you saw in the kitchen.
Yes.
And I collect, so that's 15 plates the water's going through. And I collected that, boiled the water, and then put it in the distiller. And even after that, at the bottom of it, every day I was collecting a teaspoon. I don't know if let me turn my video on so I can show it to you for the lady who was interested. Oh yeah, look, that's the water from the distiller. Do you remember I showed it to you?
Yeah, yes, yeah, all the crud that gets into the bottom.
I mean, that's collecting a teaspoon of it every single day. I just collected it because I wanted to show it to my friend, the person I bought the water ionizer from.
All right, yeah.
Anyway, I haven't forgotten. I'm going to be calling up to set up my system.
Fantastic.
For the water in the kitchen. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Rose. Thank you for that.
Thank you. We've got a few more questions. Matthew, I think you've got a question. Is that right?
Yes.
Matthew Hope, hi.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hi.
If you had the bottle of water and you put it next to your tap in the bathroom, would it have any effect on that?
Not really, because I guess if you put the bottle in the bath and waited for a while, it would. But the thing is that the way the system is designed is when you've got the information water actually in the unit and the water flows through, its exposure is maxed out, because this is a cylinder and it goes right to the back. So the information field is affecting water, and as a result, the water can flow through at a peak flow rate of X many liters per second, depending on how many bathrooms you have. So this technology is scaled for the water, and the bottled water test with the glass is sort of how I'd use the bottle. But
Right.
again, you can experiment. There are different ways to play with it, and go off and find out. There's no rules. You can go off and play.
Yeah.
Does that help?
It does. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to get your system anyway, as we're doing
great.
work on our house, and the work will start next year. But
Fantastic.
So yeah.
Did Marvin introduce you to me to us?
No, my friend Joseph Gifford Tutt.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, great.
Yeah,
fantastic. Thank you.
Jeremy, Sue is asking how much room would a standard system require?
Generally, I would say sort of fag packet size. If you imagine a double sink, a double cupboard underneath the sink, generally speaking, you can get a system into there. What happens is you have to get the plumber to put what's called a swept-back main. So where the waste trap is normally sits right in the middle of the cupboard. Well, you can buy what's called a space-saving waste trap, which basically takes the water right to the back of the cupboard. So the U-bend goes to the bottom of the cupboard, and then suddenly you've got a lot more space to play with. But generally speaking, we need at least a cupboard that's 500 high in height, and then at least 450 wide, which is fine for most cupboards because they're 600 deep, and just place to move things around and to fit it. And as long as the main stop riser is coming up through there, it can go through there quite easily. Often what people will do is send me a photograph with some measurements. I can then qualify that to make sure there's enough space there, and then set up the ordering process. But again, it's the other thing about the Grander unit is that it mustn't be near electricity. So that's another one of my kind of challenges is keeping it away from electrical plugs or pumps, especially when it's in plant rooms in bigger homes. So like boosted mains or where boilers are. So again, the actual Grander unit mustn't be near electricity. Minimum of 30 millimeters away. Sorry, 30 centimeters, 300 mil. Ideally 500, but it depends what electrical appliances are there, because you can measure these low frequency fields, and it's the only thing that can affect the emanations of the hydromagnetic magnetic quality of the Grander unit. But generally speaking, a double sink under sink system, or if you've got one cupboard, you could put the filters in, then you can mix and match it. So the thing to do is to send me a picture of where your mains is, send me pictures of the surrounding cupboards, and then that way we'll have a better idea about how it can be implemented.
Okay, really good question from Sue. So you talked about this guy that put the bottle in the pond.
Yes.
Could we clean up our rivers using something like that?
No, I mean, the thing is, the pond example, you're looking at a cubic meter of water over a 24-hour period, so that's static water. Rivers are obviously the cubic meterage of a river per second. You're talking thousands of liters per second. So the thing about that is, and it's a great question, is, well, why are rivers in a mess? And what the driver really needs to be the people that are polluting the rivers to use Grander, right? Because if they use it in their factories, basically what happens is that it actually reduces what's called the biological and chemical oxygen demand, which causes rivers to get polluted in the first place. So in Australia, they used it in an abattoir, where the abattoir was having to pay what's called a trade waste cost. And that trade waste cost was quite a lot of money. It was thousands of pounds a month, simply because the water authority had to then repatriate that water and make it sort of biologically friendly enough for it to go back into the hydrological cycle. And so he then got a Grander unit in his factory and used it across the board for spraying down and cleaning all the surfaces in the abattoir. His biological checks from the local labs, everything started to become clean. But then the water authority came to visit him, and they said, "What are you doing to your water? Because we can't charge you anymore," because they're making a fortune out of him. And he said, "Why?" He said, "Well, because the biologics of your water, the chemical and biological oxygen demand of your water has dropped so much that it's nearly acceptable to go back into the river." And so this is where Granda can really make a steal, is if companies start to adopt this technology across their infrastructure, so that when the water is ready for release, it's been revitalized, it's settled, the turbidity has changed, and it's in a state of biological coherence where the dissolved oxygen increases with Granda. So it's the oxygen level in water has a bound oxygen level. And when it's revitalized, that is, I think it's about 0.25% of the oxygen becomes available. And that completely remaps the way that water behaves in nature. So I hope that's answers your question.
Thank you, Jeremy. Some people are asking about how to contact you, and I will put all the links, all your contact details and all the links under this video when it's uploaded, and also in the email that I'll send you. So
if anyone wants it, if you're desperate to call me, which would be lovely, feel free. My mobile number is 07870. No, it's not. It's 0787. Oh my God, this is my dyslexia. You'll put it in the chat. When you ask me mobile, I can give you my email, which is jeremy@grandawater.co.uk. Sorry about that. I had a bit of a dyslexic meltdown there. Forgot my mobile phone number. Yeah, so jeremy@grandawater.co.uk. I can't remember my mobile number. How bizarre. Senior moment. Anyway.
Okay.
And my website, if you're interested, is grandawaterforlife.co.uk. So grandawaterforlife.co.uk, and my contact details are there, so you can reach me there.
Okay.
Happy to do a Zoom session and talk to you.
So Jeremy,
yes,
Louise is asking, what about right, let's just put that in there. What about health improvements? Have people reported changes and improvements in their health using this system?
Yes, absolutely. When Granda first started, there was we all remember Esther Rantzen, probably. I don't know. She was a consumer protection woman on the BBC, and she would go and investigate people that were up to no good. And Austria had a similar gentleman called Hans Kronberger, and he was the head of Austrian consumer protection for the television. And he went to Granda because people were reporting all sorts of health benefits. And he was considered to be like a sort of sham water kind of snake oil salesman. And so Hans Kronberger went to visit Johann Granda, and Johann Granda said, well, listen, why don't you take this bag, this sack of letters I've got from all the people that are drinking my water, and go and read it, and then come back to me and tell me whether or not I'm lying. And so he started reading all the letters and contacting the people, and ended up realizing this was a phenomenon that he couldn't walk away from. And so he published a book called On the Track of Water's Secrets. And in this book, basically, is all those testimonials that he wrote about it. Now, I have this book available. It's out of print, so you can download it from my Google Drive. And if you send me an email, I'll just ping it back to you. But the answer is yes, there are all sorts of benefits. One of the challenges in the slightly captured narrative we find ourselves in within the medical world is that you can't make any claims about health, particularly about water. In fact, they had one litigation from New Zealand where the distributor made some claims, and they were taken to court. And so they never make any health claims. And yet, unofficially, I have a lot of therapists that recommend Granda because they know their clients thrive even when they have serious complications. Water is the fundamental axis of hydration and the healing system of everything that happens in our lives. And so really, you have to experience it. And if you have a kinesiologist or some way of dialing into the frequency of this, we did a kinesiology conference, in fact, that Gerald Pollock was at, or was it, one of those conferences. And they discovered with kinesiology that water that's revitalized basically massively hydrates the body. It opens up all the meridians, and even milk. Someone who had a milk allergy, when the milk was revitalized, they were no longer allergic to it. And so obviously my eye example is one example, but this book is fascinating because a lot of people have skin conditions. And I think Jane earlier on, who was on the call just now, one of my clients in London, she lives in just outside Windsor, and her daughter, I know, has quite a challenging skin condition. And as soon as she started bathing in Granda, it cleared up completely. So there are all sorts of things that go on. I can't sit here and make any claims at all, otherwise advertising standards would be down my neck. All I can say is read this book and then make up your own mind.
Mm. Thank you, Jeremy. So I wanted to ask a question, if that's okay. What about if we wanted to just take our tap water and maybe put it outside? Like we all know that grounding for ourselves is very beneficial to get our bare feet onto the earth. What about if we took a jug of water and put it on the earth and maybe in the sunlight? Do you think that would help in structuring the water?
Absolutely. So the thing is that the first thing when you pour water, you give it a chance to gas off all the chlorine, because the spent chlorine will start to gas off, and that'll be a huge benefit in terms of that water's value. Obviously, sunlight can help as well. I mean, what I would do is just do a taste test and see, keep a bottle inside and take it outside and then do it and have some empirical lived experience of the difference in taste. I know that my wife puts out water with the full moon, for instance, and we put our crystals in it or bits and pieces in it. And that full moon water has an added potency. I mean, Rudolf Steiner talks a lot about the moon and light and water. So there are many cultural rituals we can have with water, and obviously making an offering to nature, or even having putting rose petals on it, or putting it near plants so that the plants can have their energetic emanations. There's a wonderful gentleman called Don Dennis who lives in Gear. I met him a long time ago, and he runs something called the International Flower Essence Repertoire, and he does some very unusual remedies with orchids, because orchids apparently have a very high devic intelligence, and when you take a remedy from them, they have a way of really helping heal the body. But he has Grander there as well, and he had a very interesting psychic called Peter Tad. But before he bought Grander, he would send his remedies to Peter, his psychic, to say, are his remedies, well, are they good this year? He'd buy a batch from, I don't know, Bushflower Remedies in Australia or Foxglove in Gatesville Mountains in America. And one year he got a sample back, and Peter said, no, there's something not right with it. And he rang up the owner, and they said, oh, we're going through a divorce. So Peter was very dialed into the frequency, the heart frequency, and how that impacts the quality of the remedies. So when he had the Grander rod, this is a bit of a funny story, but he had the Grander rod, this little pen, and again, I don't know how a psychic works, but he took it out in the kitchen. They used to come in a little leather pouch like this, and he took it out. And the water spoke to him and said, I don't want to come out in the kitchen. Take me away from all this electricity. So he went to the sitting room and tried it, took it out. And then basically, again, I can only report this. This is very woo-woo. So for those that aren't into woo, don't listen. But he basically took it out, and the water said that, it's operating on the 13th and 14th chakras levels as well. The water then said to him that it was from the Pleiades, that it had come to raise the level of human consciousness on the earth, and that it's a high level, highly coherent water. And so that's what this psychic said. And again, I have no way of verifying that. Having said that, we did have the water photographed by a guy called Harry Oldfield with the PIP photography. And basically he had a camera that could see all the auras on the body. And we had a fourth appointment that he didn't know who there was only 3 people there. And we placed a bottle of water on this table. And I got the screenshots to show you. And then we put a glass of tap water next to the blue water bottle, and literally down from the ceiling came this white light and went straight through the bottle and out into the glass. And also there was a white piece of A4 paper, and that lit up as well, because of course paper's got water in it. And so these are actual physical photographs of a phenomena that he'd never seen before. And he turned to us and said, what on earth is going on? And we had no idea, but this was a camera that could photograph auric fields around the human body. And this was so this is I have psychics or healers that will hold this bottle, and they'll be blown away by it. They'll just go, oh my God, I feel so grounded and so connected. Funny enough, we had another lady in Glastonbury, and who bought one of these boards, and she just held the board, and what happened was she said, I want 2 of them immediately. I think there's 3. And I called her, I said, what's going on? She said, well, I just knew that this is something I wanted in my life. So you can use the board under your pillow. You can put it on your belly if you're going through your monthly cycle. You can sleep next to it. You can put a glass of, we have them at home. I mean, I've got Grander in my house, but we'll put all our unctions, our homeopathic remedies, our any milk or vinegars, or even my wife puts sometimes face creams on it. because this is produced, the coherence goes on happening. The more and more goes on happening. And I had a friend in Wales, for instance, that has a 3-ton polypropylene tank with mountain runoff water. And we have these submersible rods that are used in swimming pools, in leaf hoppers, so you can spool back chlorine use. But he put one of these in his polyprop tank in Wales, and because it was a holiday cottage, it sat there for months and months and months. And I got this call from him, and he said to me, "Jeremy, you've got to come down to Wales right now." And it was happening to be a bank holiday weekend, so I said to Bron, "Okay, well, let's go." I went down there, and he put this glass of water in front of me, and I drank it. And I tell you what, I couldn't stop drinking it. It was like beyond. I thought you couldn't improve on Welsh mountain water, but this took it to a whole other level. It made me feel like I'd been meditating. Having a shower made me feel like I was in this sort of still point field. So when you understand from the biogeometry point of view that this water is so super coherent, it's like that's what pulls you towards it. It's like we want that coherence. We're so surrounded, like I described, by so many dissonant fields that are in our lives, and the soup of the Wi-Fi and all of the line of sight mobile phone masts and all of the noise that's around us. That's why we meditate. That's why we want our heart to be still, is because we want that still point. We want that toroidal point in the middle of the apple where that stillness is. And of course, this water helps to cohere that, because this water produces its own still point. So I've gone right off on a tangent.
I wanted to remind people before we finish that one of the most amazing things that you've spoken about, and this ties in with the work of Veda Austin and Masaru and other people, and I really encourage anyone who hasn't checked out their work to do so. But I just want to remind people that the new discoveries around water are showing that water's responsive to our thoughts, our emotions, and therefore we, by focusing on water and sending loving thoughts to water, can change the very structure of that water. So I'm sure you'd agree, Jeremy, that must be a good practice for us all to do, is not only structuring water perhaps with your technology or putting it outside on the earth, but also sending love and gratitude and appreciation to our water.
Well, that's so true. I mean, we've been on the take for so long culturally. We've taken from water, and what's extraordinary is that when you, sorry I interrupt you a bit, but when you actually give something back to water, when you clean it up, and then you invoke what I call the grander system, which is like a kind of an industrial prayer machine in recohering that water bounces back, and it has so much to give. And when I first had the system put in my home, I was selling reverse osmosis systems, and I was in Egham, and I was having to commute back and forwards on the M25 back to Parliament, Hampstead, where I was living. And it was like, I would feel exhausted. And when I got a grander system in my house, and I would have a shower in the evening, and suddenly I came alive. Suddenly the evening was a possibility of cooking a meal rather than getting a takeaway and not sitting in front of the TV. It was like, suddenly I was like engaged. And so when you put energy back into water, it gives it back to you. So literally swimming in a pool or having a bath or a shower. I've got clients that just love their baths now, because their baths have become a whole ritual. When we've been out, we've been busy in the world, surrounded by all this nonsense that we have to wade through. When you come back, and the replenishing, regenerative nature of having a shower or a bath in grander water, it's like, I went away in the summertime. In fact, when I went to see Veda last October, we got a little caravan, and we came back, and I'd sort of forgotten the effect of grander. But when I came back and I had a shower, oh my God, I thought I could feel the difference, because when you live with it, you're habituated to it. But when you've been away for a while, and a lot of my clients say to me, that's the biggest problem with grander, is that they have to put up with a really low quality water experience wherever else they go. I mean, you can get little flexi units, about £800, that you can put on a shower, for instance, but you need to filter out the chlorine. And that's what goes on our single tap system. So there are intermediate ways of working with it. But to be fair with you, if you really see the value of it, there's nothing more extraordinary. And it's a privilege to be able to afford it, and also to be able to then have it as a legacy, because this technology doesn't run out. The actual grand unit lasts indefinitely, which is terrible from the point of view of sales, because I can't sell you a brand new shiny iPhone like Apple can next September. It's like, once I've sold a system, that's that. If it's sized properly, they can take it from house to house to house. And so we rely on word of mouth. We rely on people celebrating it. I know my friend Jane outside Windsor, you know, she's got friends around the street that come to her house to fill up because they can't afford to get a system. So she's super generous, very hearted lady. And she will lets them fill up with water. I'm not quite sure whether she should charge them for that because the filter costs, obviously. But we didn't discuss the filter costs. It's about 470 quid a year for the filters, the replacement, but that's a small price. It's about £1 a day, for instance, for all the water to be drinkable.
Jeremy, thank you so much. You've given
You're
us so
welcome.
much information. There may be a few other little questions, but we're going to put your email address, we've done that, and your website, and I'll put that in the email tomorrow. So
Thank you.
we will upload this recording to YouTube, send you links so that you can watch again. There's so much information you may well want to watch again. But I want to say a big thank you for all your time and effort that you've put into this presentation this evening. Lots of positive feedback from people. So yes, thank you, Jeremy.
Well,
and
thank you for allowing me to come.
May have to get you back another time because there's so much more to talk about. I'd love to talk more about the biogeometry side of things, but for now, thank you. And we've run a little bit over time, but I want to thank you all for watching this evening, for asking brilliant questions, and for being with us, bringing your hearts into this space, connecting with us. And yeah, it's been lovely. And we've got some other brilliant talks coming up later this year. Our next one is on the 3rd of July. We're moving really to talk about the spiritual heart. We've got a wonderful woman, Cece Williams, who's just released a book talking about her story with the spiritual heart. And that's going to be wonderful. So I'll be sending out details of that in our newsletter. So thank you to you all. And once again, a big thank you to you, Jeremy. We're very appreciative.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated it. Thank you so much.
All right. I'm going to say goodnight to you all. See you again
Thank
soon.
you for all listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.